I was surrounded by 3 rubber-gloved, white-coated clinicians at Bergen Pines Hospital in Bergen County, New Jersey, and was told that early intervention was of extreme importance, that not doing anything was folly. Well, after protesting about 3 times in a row, I bolted out of there and prepared to die.
When I started taking it, I broke out with herpes inside my mouth, inside my nose, all over my lips, and it was like all I wanted to do was sleep. I didn't want to get out of bed. I had pains. I knew going through the detox of drugs, my body well enough to know that AZT after several weeks was horrible for me.
I am taking AZT, and I'm taking acyclovir. I don't like it, and that's what brings me here, to come back to the fundamentals of taking care of my body and my mind together.
It wasn't until '89 or so when this real shaky research I felt came through saying that if your T4 cells have gone below 500, you should be on AZT, and the implication was that people who chose not to do that were being irresponsible.
Everything they'd given me didn't work, and they gave me a new name. They labeled me nucleoside sensitive. So there's a genre of us that are nucleoside sensitive. So what do you do now? You know, I can't take their drugs. My body didn't want their drugs, you see, but that was fortunate that I really took that as a good sign. And I knew, and this was my advice to just everyone, take control of your treatment. Educate yourself about your body. It's your body. They don't know how you're feeling. They don't know what's going on. All of the medication in the West, you know, it dissolves you in one part of your body. It may help you in another.
I started getting sick around 1985 after I was exposed to defoliant C while in service. I got 2 tests done. Both weren't conclusive. Then I came down in a series of about 12 different opportunistic infections, thrush and candidiasis, and what they thought was KS, and 3 bouts of PCP pneumonia. And those who tell you can't survive PCP pneumonia, full of crap, because you can. Just can't take cortisone when they offer it to you, or pentamidine. And I was lucky enough to be in ACT UP, when ACT UP still had some muster and anger to it, back in '85 and '86, and started taking a look at what was going on at the NIH and the CDC, and flipped out, and was scared out of my mind because there's nothing coming down the pipeline from them.
The people who follow the advice of the so-called experts, the doctors, the AIDS expert, they get sick and die. It's almost 100%. And yet wherever you find pockets of long-term survivors and people who are at risk in staying healthy, they've taken charge of their health.
None of us anticipated the AIDS epidemic. By 1984, all of the friends that I knew and loved had died. And I was still around.
From the experience of my friends who've died having used AZT or any of the other pharmaceuticals that doctors love to prescribe for AIDS, I've also read a lot of information about AZT. I understand it's very toxic. I would never take it. God willing, I will never take AZT.
I would say that approximately 70 to 75% of my friends are no longer around. 4 years ago, I had perhaps one close friend. I've always been very gregarious, and I always had a good support of friends. And for 3 years, up to 4 years ago, I was stripped out of all my friends because they all died. So all in all, I've known probably like about 15 people. That's a lot of people for one person to know to have died of this illness.
I felt when I first was diagnosed that this was a signal for me that I really had to change my life and that I didn't have a choice anymore.
I made a decision that I could look at this as being a victim or look at it as another one of life's adventures, and I decided to look at it as an adventure.
When I was diagnosed, my first reaction was nausea, and then the next reaction, I can honestly say that, was a feeling that I am not going to die. I'm not going to let myself die. You know, if there's anything at all that I can do to contribute to, you know, to my being healthy in my future, then I was going to try and find out what it was and do it.
The first change I made was I faced death, you know, more than once with drug overdoses and such, but I decided that I really wanted to live, and in doing that, I decided to do anything and everything that was possible to make sure that my life would be full and that I would enjoy the moment because it was too precious.
How do you help them find people who may have not tuned into their own inner voice, their own power, their own spirit, face this challenge? And I don't think there's any question that marshaling the forces of the immune system, marshaling the will to live, promotes health. People might just challenge it, but I personally can't. There's just too much evidence of people just getting a grip, commanding their lives, and living longer, and making something of this, the challenges presented by AIDS.
I decided in 1991, January, I'll never forget it, I changed my doctor that insisted on me taking AZT because that's what they told them. And I changed that, and I changed a lot of things, and I took my own power back.
I started doing a lot of reading as far as reading my own blood work, so I knew what questions to ask my doctors. Many of my doctors got frustrated with me. They would, you know, tell me they're the authority, that they know that not to get caught up in this, but I always wanted to know. And I fired quite a few doctors.
Came to heal, and thank God for Mike, because I started calming down. And I started realizing that getting arrested every week or so with ACT UP wasn't working, and that if I stopped being so panicked, I could start taking control of this.
Clearly, over and over again, people come to our meetings and say something very similar to what he said. I'm feeling better than ever. AIDS was the best thing that ever happened to me. When I heard that the first time, it gave me a headache. I couldn't understand how someone can say that. But then you hear it over and over again, and you carefully understand what's being said. What's being said is that people were empowered. They took charge of their lives, the whole way of living. It's more than simply their health, but their whole relationship to their life has changed. And it's one where they're ready, willing, and able, and reliant on themselves to do whatever they need to do.
How does a person with a life-threatening illness get through a day? What goes into the formula to help them stay alive? Let's take a look up close.
After I started to recover from my initial confusion and fear finding out that I was HIV positive, I said to myself, okay, now it's time to get serious and really explore ways of taking care of yourself the best way possible. And I really, you know, I was an addict, drug and alcohol. I did everything I could to get out of my body. So everything that I've been doing since then has been to try to get into my body. And I do that with exercise, meditation techniques that involve breathing, anything that sort of brings me into the moment and back into my body. I put together a little ritual that I try to do as often as I can in the mornings. It's pieces of Tai Chi and yoga and a Chinese exercise system called the 18 Therapies, plus little meditation. And I feel so different after I do that in the morning. It's incredible. It sees me through the whole day. I also try to connect with nature as much as I can. It's very difficult living in the city, but I'm fortunate to have a garden where I live in Brooklyn, and I I love to just get out there and dig in the dirt and look at the worms and see growing things, and it helps to remind me of the cycles of life. And when I can, I get off into the forest, and there the cycles of things are so obvious and so beautiful. I try to connect with that, and try to connect with the life force in everything that I see.